Hi. So today we are going to discuss about REST API versus WebSocket. So this is our new topic for today, and what are we are going to cover over here is REST request response model, that is REST WebSocket persistent connections. We are going to cover real-time communication, the chat architecture. The most important of all is why WhatsApp uses WebSockets. What is the reason behind it? Why it is not using REST API, and when to use what? WebSocket or REST API. So let's get started over here. So the first thing first is request response model, that is REST. So imagine you are calling a friend to ask a question. You are calling a friend to ask a question. You call them, ask your questions, they give you an answer. Okay, you call them, ask your questions, they then give you an answer. Okay, then call ends. Then call ends. Now, if you need to ask another question, if you need to ask another question, you have to call them again from scratch. You have to call them again from scratch. That exactly how REST API works. That's exactly how REST API works. Okay, now let me give you a brief idea all about how it really works. So, REST, which is known as a representational state transfer, is a stateless architecture. Is a stateless architecture where where client initiates the connection, and sends a request sends a request. Server on the other hand, server on the other hand, server on the other hand, server on the other hand processes the request and sends back a res- response. So here's your client and here's your server. I'm just giving you a brief idea first. So client initiates the connection and sends the request. Server processes the request and sends a response. Okay. And then connection between them closes closes immediately just after the response. Now if client needs more data, if this client needs more data, it must initiate a new request. It must initiate a new request. Okay. So let's let me tell you in more detail over here about this. Okay, so we have, let me change the color. So we have client over here, and this is server over here, and this is server over here. Now this client, this client, okay, it establishes a HTTP connection. It establishes a HTTP connection. It sends a request. It sends a request with method such as get, post, etc. Right? And it also includes headers, body, if required. If required. Now this server receives and processes what? Queries database, queries database, computes logic, computes logic. Server then sends the response. Server then sends the response. Okay, uh, with some status codes, and that codes could be 200, which means okay, right? 404, 500, some errors. Okay, if there are errors, then it will give us the status code. If it is fine, then it will give you 200. That is okay, right? Now after that, request con, response get, the connection closes. The connection closes. Now for another question, you have to start all over again. New connection handshake required. New connection handshake required. Okay. So if it will send a new request. It will start all over again. So this is called this is called REST request cycle. REST request cycle. REST request cycle. Now this REST also has unique characteristics. Also has characteristics. Unique characteristics. The first characteristics is it is stateless. It is stateless, which means server doesn't remember previous requests. Second, synchronous. Synchronous, which means client waits for response before continuing. Clients waits for response before continuing. Before continuing. Third, one way. One client, only client can initiate. Okay, only client can initiate. So this is as I told you, it's one way first. Okay, so one way. Fourth, connection overhead. Connection overhead, which means each request has handshake cost. Each request has handshake cost. Okay, then it is best for simple crude operations. Simple crude operations. Okay, simple crude operations. Simple crude operations. Okay, let me give an example over here. Let me also explain it. Okay. Okay. Now this example is of this first example is of okay. Let me do it over here. Anyways, okay. This first example over here, this one, this first example over here. Okay. This is getting user profile, getting user profile. Okay. This is a request and this is getting user profile. Here, get means, get means I want to get, that is retrieve, fetch some data or retrieve the data or retrieve the data. This API slash users slash 123 means go to the users section of the API. Go to the users section of the API and find user number 123 and find user number 123. This HTTP slash 1.1 means use the HTTP version 1.1 protocol to send this. 1.1 protocol to send this. This host example.com means that send this request to the server at example.com. Send this request to the server at example.com. Now this part 2 is response. Is response. Now if you see HTTP slash 1.1200 OK, this means I got your request and I am giving you the answer. And I am giving you the answer. Now 200 means over here success. 4 here it is 20 is 200, that is okay. Now if it is 404, as I told you before, if it is 404 or 500, okay, so if it is 404 then it means not found. If it is 500 then it means server error. Okay, here this id 123 name John, email john at example.com. This is the actual data in JSON format. Actual data in JSON format. So in simple terms, here's the data. Here's the data that you asked for. You have user ID, you have name, that is John, and you have email address. And you have email address. And you have email address. Okay, you have email address. Right. So this is an example of REST. This is an example of REST that we are getting the user profile. Okay. Now let's go back and let's start with the second topic, which is WebSocket. That is persistent connection. Persistent connection. Okay. Now imagine you and your friend have walkie-talkies. This is you and this is your friend. Okay. Now you both have walkie-talkies. You both have walkie-talkies. You press the button once to establish the connection and it stays open. Now either of you can send messages anytime without any overhead. The other person, this other person, can also send a message to you instantly, like this, then this, then this. Okay, even when you are not asking for one, even even if you are not asking for one. Okay, so this is web socket. This is web socket. Okay, so web socket is a protocol that establishes a persistent bidirectional communication channel between client and server. So WebSocket is a protocol that establishes a persistent bidirectional communication channel between client and server. Okay. Unlike REST, unlike REST, it maintains an open it maintains an open connection where both sides can send data anytime. Okay. So it maintains an open connection where both sides can send data at any time. So let's discuss about its about its working in a bit detail over here. In a bit detail over here. So you have client over here. Let me change the color again. You have client over here and you have server over here. Okay. You have client over here and you have server over here. Now client initiates WebSocket handshake. This client over here initiates WebSocket handshake. Okay. Server over here accepts. Server over here accepts. Okay. And connection remains open. Connection remains open. Now both client and server can send data at any time. Can send data at any time. Anytime. So no handshake overhead per message. No handshake overhead per message. And connection persists until explicitly closed. Connection persists until explicitly closed. Okay. Now let me show you an example. WebSocket handshake example. Okay. Now if you see this particular part, okay, this part, this is client sends. This is part one over here. Now if you see get slash chat http slash 1.1, this means client is saying, hey server, I am using http protocol to connect to the chat endpoint. Okay, on the server example.com. On the server example.com. Now this upgrade colon WebSocket means wait, I don't want regular HTTP. I want to upgrade to WebSocket. I want to upgrade to WebSocket. Now this connection upgrade means upgrade this connection from HTTP to WebSocket. Upgrade this connection from HTTP to WebSocket. Now this WebSocket SEC WebSocket key. This is a security key. So the server knows this is a legitimate WebSocket request and it prevents hacking. Okay. So in simple terms, client says hi server. In simple terms, client says hi server. Client says hi server Hi server, I want to connect, I want to connect, but not as a normal HTTP request, but not as a normal HTTP request. Okay, I want to upgrade, I want to upgrade to a WebSocket connection. I want to upgrade to a WebSocket connection. Okay, so we can talk back and forth indefinitely. So we can talk back and forth indefinitely. Okay, so this is what it means. Now, this second part, that is server response. That is server response. Now, over here, this HTTP 1.1 switching protocols, this means, or this says, yes, I agree, switching from HTTP to WebSocket protocol. Upgrade WebSocket means that it is upgrading to WebSocket. Okay, and connection upgrade means this connection is now upgraded. This connection is now upgraded. Now, this particular part again is a security confirmation code. Okay, it proves that I am the real server. So again, in simple terms, it means I agree. Let's upgrade this to a WebSocket. We can now talk bidirectionally without hanging up. Without hanging up. Okay, without hanging up. But in the same way, this WebSocket. Let me go back over there. This WebSocket. This WebSocket also has unique characteristics. Also has unique characteristics. The first is it is persistent. It is persistent, which means connection stays open. Connection stays open. Second is bidirectional, as I have already told you multiple times. It means both sides can initiate the message or messages. Okay. Third, low latency, that is no handshake per message. Fourth, full duplex, full duplex, which means send and receive simultaneously. Fifth, stateful, that is server maintains connection state. Sixth, it is best for real time applications. Best for real time applications, instant notifications, okay, and updates. Live updates. So it is best for real-time applications, instant notifications, and live updates. And live updates. Okay. Now, relating to this, let's discuss about real-time communication. Real-time communication. Okay. Now, what does real-time mean over here or for you? What does real-time mean over here? In my opinion, real time communication means data is delivered and processed almost instantly with minimal delay. With minimal delay. Now think of the difference between a phone call that is a real time and sending a letter that is not a real time. So it means data is delivered and processed almost instantly. Almost instantly. Now, why REST? Why REST cannot handle real time? Why REST cannot handle real time? Okay. See, with REST, the server cannot push data to the client. In real time scenarios such as polling, you would need to poll hundreds of times per second, which is wasteful. That's why REST cannot handle real time. That's why REST cannot handle real time. Now, if I go with some real time use cases, some real time use cases, some real time use cases over here. So, first is the chat applications, okay, in which messages must be delivered instantly. Second is stock trading dashboards, where prices update hundreds of times per second. Third real time use case is live notifications, okay, that is alerts, updates pushed as they happen, updates pushed as they happen. And last but not the least, there might be other examples as well, but we are taking top four. Live streaming, that is comments, reaction appear instantly. So these are the four real-time use cases. There might be others as well. Now let's discuss the most important topic of all, that is why WhatsApp uses WebSocket. Why WhatsApp uses WebSocket? Any idea if you have? Or have you ever heard about it that WhatsApp uses WebSocket? Okay, so let me give you. It uses WebSocket because of some of the requirements. Because some of the requirements. The first requirement is messages must be delivered in under 1 second. Second. Real time typing indicators. Instant online offline presence. Fourth, minimal battery drain on mobile. And last but not the least, message delivery confirmation. Okay, you must be seeing these blue ticks if you remember. Two blue ticks. Two blue ticks. Okay, blue ticks. Okay, let's do one more thing over here. Let's suppose here you have Alice. Here you have uh, Bob. Okay, and then here you have Charlie. Okay, and here you have WhatsApp server. So basically, I'm telling you how WhatsApp uses. Wait a minute, I think I have one more thing over here. I think I have this. Yeah, I think if this is visible, somewhat is visible. Okay, yeah, seems visible. Okay, right. So over here, this user, that is Alice. Okay, that is Alice. Let me change the pen over here. That is Alice. Okay, sends a message that is from Alice phone to this WebSocket server. Okay, let me take black over here. Alice to the uh, yeah. Okay, okay. So Alice, from Alice phone, the message has gone to the WebSocket server instantly. Okay, the server receives and processes. It validates the message. It validates the message, checks if Bob is online, broadcasts to Bob if connected, and stores in database for offline deliver. Stores in database for offline deliver. Now Bob receives instantly. Bob's receive instantly. Okay. Now from WebSocket server to Bob's phone, there is an instant push. There is an instant push. Message appears in chat. Message appears in chat. No delay. No polling. No polling. Okay. And then the fourth thing comes is the delivery confirmation. Delivery confirmation. Now from Bob's phone to the server. Bob's phone to the server. Okay. It says I received it. Okay. Then from this server to Alice phone. Okay. Where you will see two ticks that says two blue ticks that says message delivered. Message delivered. Now, last but not the least is this what you call presence indicators. Okay, which means Alice can see that Bob is typing in real time, and Alice can see if Bob is online or offline. Online or offline. Okay, online. So there are five stages of it. First is user sends the message. Okay, then server receives and processes. Bob receives instantly. Then there is a delivery confirmation. Okay, from Bob's phone to server I received it, and server to Alice phone. And there are presence indicators where Alice can see if Bob is typing or if Bob is online or offline. Okay, so this this is how WhatsApp uses via WebSocket real time. Now the question comes in mind: what would break with REST? What would break with REST? Okay, I hope you understand my point. The question is what would break with REST? Okay, like if not using WebSocket and REST is being used. Okay, now in this case, what happens when Alice wouldn't know Bob got the message for several seconds? Okay, this is the first reason. Okay, let me come over here. Question is, question is, what would break with REST. What would break with REST? The first thing I said that when Alice wouldn't know, or Alice wouldn't know, Bob got the message for several seconds. Second, Bob's phone would poll every second, draining the battery quickly if rest is used, draining the battery quickly. Okay. Typing indicators in socket they were visible. In this case, typing indicators won't work. Typing indicators won't work. Okay. Online status would be stale, delayed by polling interval. Okay. Online status delayed. Okay. So this is what? This is latency, battery, user experience, and presence. Okay. So this Alice over here, this is this is latency. Okay. That wouldn't know Bob got the message for several seconds. Then this is related to battery. Okay. Draining the battery quickly. Okay. And user experience, that typing indicators work won't work. And this online status delete is the presence. But most important of them is the scalability. Scalability, that is billions of polling requests would overload servers would overload servers would overload servers. Then there are some WhatsApp additional features enabled by WebSocket. Okay. Then these are like call signaling, voice video calls, use WebSocket to establish connection. Then group chat, broadcast to multiple users instantly, status updates, photos, disappearing messages, media delivery progress, messages, reactions, and synchronization across devices. That is multiple phones with the same account. With the same account. Now let's start with the last one. Let's discuss the chat application architecture with WebSocket. Okay, like suppose we are thinking of building a chat application, and before going ahead, we should understand its architecture before building it. So this is chat application architecture with WebSocket. Okay, so we have over here user A with a browser. Okay, here we have here we have WebSocket server. Okay, and here we have user B, that is browser. Okay, browser. Then there is then there is database message store. Database message store. Okay, database message store. Okay, now what is happening over here? What is happening over here? User A opens user A opens chat app. Okay, this then WebSocket. I mean to say this is a connection setup. User A opens chat app. Okay, and then WebSocket connects to the server. Or in other words, let's say user A types and sends a message over WebSocket. Okay, user A types and sends a message over WebSocket. Okay, server server receives an instantly broadcast message to connected users in that so user B receives message. Okay, user B receives message, or message appear on user B's screen immediately. User B's screen immediately. Now the message, this message, okay, is also persisted to database for history. Is also persisted to the database or stored in the database for history. Okay. Now this server also tracks who is online, tracks uh, who is online, offline, who is online, offline, or typing, right? Or typing, or many other things, etc. Right? Or many other things, etc. Now, if WebSocket, if WhatsApp use REST polling, then what could have happened, right? If WhatsApp, okay. Now here we are discussing about our chat application architecture, right? So let's say if my chat application is using REST polling, then what could have happened? Then what could have happened? Okay. Any thoughts? Any thoughts on this? What could have happened? I would say client would need to ask any new message every 100 milliseconds or so, and that's 10 requests per second per user. With 10 million concurrent users, 100 million requests per second. Server would collapse, messages would have latency, battery drain on mobile, constant network activity. But with a WebSocket, with a WebSocket, with WebSocket, one connection per user, that is persistent. Server pushes message instantly when available. Minimal overhead, instant delivery, battery efficient. Battery efficient. So the question comes, new question comes, when to use REST and when to use WebSocket. When to use REST and when to use REST and when to use WebSocket. Use REST when data doesn't change frequently. Client only needs to ask for data occasionally. Third, simple, crude operations. That is, create, update, delete, and read. Okay. Fourth, stateless operations. You need caching. You need caching. Okay. Few examples. Getting user profiles, notifications, notifications. No, I think I'm missing something. Not getting user profile over here. Not getting user profile. That's not example of this. Creating a post or deleting a record. So use REST when all these things happen. Another, use WebSocket when real-time delivery is required. Second, server needs to push data to client without being asked. Third, bi-directional communication needed. Many, fourth point, many rapid updates expected. Fifth, low latency is critical. And sixth, if you go with some examples, I would say chat, live trading, collaborative, collaborative editing, notifications. But but many modern applications use both. Use both. Use both. REST and WebSocket. That is REST for authentication, user profile fetching, settings, and WebSocket for real-time updates, messaging, and notifications. And notifications. So, what we studied, what studied, we studied request response model. We studied WebSocket, its real-time communication, the chat architecture, and most important of all, why WhatsApp uses WebSocket and when to use what. So, what are the key takeaways over here? Key takeaways over here. First, REST is for request response. And second, WebSocket. WebSocket is for persistent communication. That's it. Hopefully you like this lecture and you understand the difference between WebSocket and REST, and it might help you while building some applications. I would urge you to try and build some applications related to chat or something related to stock market trading, and just think about it, how you're going to build that application and how WebSocket or REST API can help you in building that application. Thank you very much. Happy learning. If you like it, please subscribe. Thank you very much.